Dorothy had been living on the streets for 2 years now. At 63, she'd never imagined her life would take this turn. But after the medical bills from her husband's cancer exhausted their savings, then the house, then everything else, she'd found herself with nowhere to go. She'd made a small camp behind the old library on Elm Street. It wasn't much. A sleeping bag, a few belongings, and a shopping cart. The kindness of the church volunteers who brought soup on Wednesdays. But it was hers, and she'd learned to be grateful for small mercies. That Saturday afternoon, Dorothy was sorting through donated clothes someone had left by the dumpster when she heard it. A sound that made her blood run cold. A child screaming. She looked up to see smoke pouring from a second-floor window of the apartment building across the street. Flames licked at the curtains, and in that window a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, pressed against the glass crying for help. Dorothy didn't think. She just moved. Her legs, stiff from sleeping on concrete, carried her across the street faster than she'd run in years. The front door was locked. She could hear sirens in the distance, but they weren't close enough. That child didn't have time. A trash can sat by the entrance. Dorothy grabbed it, swung it with strength she didn't know she still had, and smashed through the glass door. The alarm shrieked, but she was already inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time, following the smoke. The apartment door was hot to the touch. Dorothy wrapped her jacket around her hand and tried the knob. Locked. She threw her shoulder against it once, twice. On the 3rd try, it gave way. Smoke filled the apartment, thick and black. Dorothy dropped low, remembering fire safety lessons from decades ago when she'd been a school secretary. "Where are you, honey?" she called. "Keep talking to me." "Here." The small voice came from a bedroom. "I can't get out." Dorothy crawled toward the sound, her lungs burning. She found the girl huddled in a corner, terrified, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "I've got you, sweetheart. Put your face in my jacket." Dorothy wrapped the child in her arms and crawled back toward the door. The heat was intense now. Part of the ceiling groaned ominously. They made it to the hallway just as firefighters came rushing up the stairs. Strong hands took the child from Dorothy's arms. Someone wrapped an oxygen mask over her face. She collapsed against the wall, coughing violently. "Ma'am, you need medical attention," a paramedic insisted. "The girl," Dorothy gasped. "Is she? Oh, she's fine. Thanks to you. You saved her life." Dorothy closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. Then the adrenaline faded, and she felt every one of her 63 years in her aching bones. They treated her for smoke inhalation at the scene. A news crew arrived, cameras rolling, but Dorothy slipped away before they could interview her. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to know the child was safe. She made her way back to her spot behind the library, exhausted and still coughing. An hour later, a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Dorothy watched warily as a man in an expensive suit stepped out. He was perhaps 60, with distinguished gray hair and an air of authority that marked him as someone important. He walked directly toward her. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Are you the woman who pulled a child from the burning building?" Dorothy shrugged. "I just did what anyone would do." "No." His voice cracked slightly. "Not everyone would run into a burning building for a stranger's child. That was my granddaughter, Emma. You saved her life." Dorothy looked up at him then, really looked. His eyes were red-rimmed. His hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just gratitude, this was the desperate relief of someone who'd almost lost everything. "Is she all right?" Dorothy asked. "Thanks to you, yes. She's being checked at the hospital, but she's going to be fine." He sat down on the concrete beside her, heedless of his expensive suit. "I'm Thomas Westfield. Emma's mother, my daughter Sarah, she was at work. A neighbor was supposed to be watching Emma, but..." He shook his head. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is that you were there. I'm glad I could help." Thomas looked at her camping setup, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're living out here." It wasn't a question. Dorothy felt a familiar shame creep up. "For now." "I'm working on getting back on my feet. May I ask what happened?" There was no judgment in his voice, only genuine curiosity. So Dorothy told him. About her husband, Richard. About the cancer that ate through their savings and then their future. About being too proud to ask their own children for help. One struggling with 3 kids of his own, the other overseas in the military. about the gaps in Medicare she hadn't understood until it was too late. Thomas listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Dorothy," he finally said, "I run Westfield Industries. We manufacture medical equipment, and I've spent the last 15 years making money while people like you fell through the cracks of a system I helped perpetuate." His voice was heavy with something like shame. "You saved my granddaughter's life. You saved my whole world. Please let me help you." "I don't want charity, Donna. It's not charity. It's gratitude. And maybe penance." Thomas pulled out his phone. "I own several apartment buildings in the city. You'll have a place to live rent-free. Not fancy, but clean and safe. I'll also arrange for a job. Nothing beyond your capabilities, but enough to give you independence and dignity. And there's a foundation I run that helps with medical debt. We'll work on clearing yours." Dorothy felt tears burning her eyes. "Why? Why would you do all this?" Thomas's voice broke. "Because Emma is 7 years old. The same age my wife was when her father died. Her family had nothing, no one to help them. She grew up in poverty, worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college. She taught me that success means nothing if you don't help others climb up beside you." He wiped his eyes. "She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer, like your husband. And I've been trying to honor her memory ever since." He looked at Dorothy directly. "You risked your life for my granddaughter without hesitation, without knowing who she was or what you might gain. That's the kind of person my wife was. The kind of person I want Emma to grow up to be. Please let me do this. Not because you need it, but because I need to. Because honoring people like you honors my wife's memory." Dorothy thought of Richard, who'd always said the measure of a person was what they did when no one was watching. She'd saved Emma because it was right, not for reward. But maybe accepting help with grace was also important. Maybe letting Thomas help her was giving him something he needed too. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you." Thomas smiled with visible relief. "Thank you. Emma wants to meet you when you're ready. She's been asking for the angel lady. My daughter Sarah does too. She's beside herself with gratitude." 3 weeks later, Dorothy moved into a small apartment with a view of a park. The job Thomas arranged was at a community center, helping coordinate services for other people experiencing homelessness. Work she understood deeply. Emma visited every Saturday with her mother, always bringing drawings she'd made for Miss Dorothy. They'd have tea and cookies, and Emma would chatter about school, while Dorothy listened with the full attention her own grandchildren had once received. Thomas stopped by too, usually with Sarah. They became unlikely friends, the CEO and the formerly homeless woman, bound together by a moment of crisis and the choice Dorothy had made without thinking. "You know," Thomas said one Saturday, watching Emma and Dorothy color together, "I've been thinking about our healthcare advocacy work. We need someone who understands the system from the perspective of those it fails. Would you consider consulting for the foundation, helping us actually make a difference?" Dorothy looked at Emma, carefully staying within the lines of her drawing. She thought of all the others still sleeping behind libraries, still falling through cracks, still invisible to people who could help. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that very much. Because sometimes one moment of courage opens doors we never knew existed. And sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back." The Anberber. True heroism asks for nothing in return, but grace allows us to accept the gifts that gratitude offers.